Welcome again to Just Saying, brought to you by the American Landscape. My name is Cliff Nichols. I am your host. And today we are absolutely thrilled to have Katherine Makinney, who is the founder of AmericanPOWs.com, to discuss all things conservative issues and why her flag may be upside down there. Yep. Anyway, welcome, Katherine.
Thank you.
Would you like to give your bona fides
Sure.
as to where you come from, why you are where you are, and why you're a conservative?
Sure. So I grew up in the 60s and the 70s in Southern California, and I was fortunate enough to go to an advanced placement program in high school where I was able to take extracurricular courses from the American Enterprise Institute on basically what a really true free society would look like. It was kind of a course in libertarianism, if you will, but at the time that the proposals were not technically feasible, although they are now. But the idea was you want government, a federal government should only protect our borders and do things that we can't do for ourselves. So I started thinking about comparative economic systems in high school, and I went to Stanford. I studied overseas at Stanford, and I studied under a Marxist professor, comparative economics. And this was in Austria. We were able to take field trips to Czechoslovakia and Hungary. This is before the wall fell. And it was like going from color to black and white. So I said to him, it doesn't appear to be working. And he said, oh, but it will when the whole world is communist. So I started studying communism because that didn't seem very logical to me. And he was a high IQ individual. So I started learning about communist revolutions, what causes them, what it looks like, and it was scary. It's scary because we have had strains of influence in our country for the last 100 years, really, but only in the last, I would say, since Obama has it really become pervasive. And
Obama started it as a 16-year agenda, as
yeah.
I understand. He just said, "Let's go for it."
Yeah, and because they had started, there's 4 phases typically of changing a culture or a country from within, which is demoralization, and that's the long march through the institutions such as schools and the justice system. And so you started to see that in the 70s. Destabilization, where you have an increase in crime. Soros started funding DAs that don't enforce laws. So we started seeing that in the last 10 years. Then you started to see more protests, social unrest. That was really clear in the 2020 George Floyd protests. Then you have a crisis like we did with the pandemic, and people get shocked and fearful. One of the key techniques
disoriented.
Yeah, one of the key techniques of Marxism is terror, is frightening people. And so then you have normalization, and that's what they're trying to move into, where authoritarianism is normal.
They separate and divide. They cause fear.
Yep.
And they use that fear, everybody against each other, while their useful idiots do their job and do their work. I don't know why. Mayorkas comes to mind, when he testifies in Congress that there is no border problem. Tell us about this organization you started.
I will. I'll just finish explaining what I understand about why I started it, what I understand about what it looks like. In Marxism, the way you take over a country is to divide, and you divide it between the oppressed and the oppressor. And so they did that in both Russia and China economically. So you had in Russia, you had the czars and the plutocrats, and then you had pretty much the serfs, everybody else. And so you develop this resentment and anger of this unfair society. And so you get the people to overthrow the power structures. That happened in the Bolshevik Revolution. It happened in the Cultural Revolution in China. And they've been trying so hard the last century to do that in the United States, but it didn't work because frankly, the poor in the United States are doing pretty good. You know, you compare them to the
But now
poor.
we have a candidate that wants us, tells the people we need to be unburdened by the past.
Right,
What
which
does
is a
folks mean
communist.
by that?
That's a communist saying. Uh, it means one of the techniques to get people to normalize a completely new world where it's completely authoritarianism, and if you complain, you are eliminated essentially, or they will, they will cancel you. They'll cancel your job. Um, they use terror to do that. But so anyway, one of the ways they do that is what we saw in 2020 and since under the Biden administration. But the other thing that they're doing is trying to normalize destroying our culture. So they destroy our culture not just through destroying statues and rewriting history books. They've done that in our schools, but also through flooding our country with people from all over the world so that our culture's diluted. And so you start to see this and you're like, oh my gosh, it's happening here. And it's shocking, right?
Like filling our boards of education with simpaticos, useful idiots that go along with their program. And as
That's the
Mao said,
march. Yeah.
give us the youth, and in one
Mhm.
generation we will win. We will defeat your country.
Well, they started that. They started doing that in the 80s and 90s. And honestly, they were fairly successful. It wasn't until the pandemic that a lot of parents woke up. They were watching what their kids were taking in over Zoom, and they were shocked. And so there's been this reaction to it. And yeah, and my feeling is that we have this election. We have a chance. We have a chance with this election to at least turn it back. I'm not convinced most Americans really understand what's going on. And that's a little heartbreaking because what is going on is destruction. It's trying to destroy our way of life.
Well, to
And
their credit, they're busy making a living and providing for their families, and they're not attuned to what's going on the ground in detail level.
right.
You
And
can't hardly blame them, but
what the bigger picture is. And Trump is he's got amazing, really amazing world-class capabilities in terms of negotiation and energy and kind of savviness. But what he doesn't really have is he's not super articulate in explaining the bigger picture. And that's one of the great things about his new running mate, J.D. Vance. So anyway, when I started seeing this, and then I watched what happened on January 6th, January 6th was a much larger version of what the FBI, which the Long March to the Institutions, Obama had started. Obama was really an architect to say, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to do it in 16 years. You're right, 2 8-year presidencies. And so he weaponized all the agencies. We now have something like 450 agencies, which is crazy. But anyway, the FBI is a large one, and what is necessary in is a police state. And so one of the goals of defund the police was to get a federal police force, and also but he had the FBI and they're armed. And so he changed the leadership of all of these organizations, including the military, and he hired Marxists, people that completely agreed with him. like Brennan and
Millie.
Milley and Comey, and they think the world would be a much better place if it was communist. Now, the first mantra of communism, because they're creating this utopia, right? The first mantra is lie, cheat, steal, murder. At the end of the 20th century, they had killed over 100 million people because you're creating, you're going to have to break a few eggs because you're creating such a great world. And so they will lie. And we saw that last night, right, with the Kamala interview. She just kept lying, like, I'm going to obey the law. It's prima facie.
Thankfully, Brett Baier was not letting her slide on that. And you can see her getting increasingly angry with his intrusion into her private space.
Well, she's not used to being challenged. Yeah.
No. Well, what you were saying, I just recently read Unhumans by Jeff Sobek. He gives a wonderful historic digest of what you're speaking of. The use of useful idiots, the takeovers of a system, convincing the people to forget their past, like the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, and our founding fathers.
Because those are oppressive.
To go towards utopia.
Right.
We're looking for a bright, joy-filled future. But to do that, you have to identify the enemies and remove them.
Right. And that's where her mantra that she repeats all the time, unburdened by the past, forgetting what is it exactly? Unburdened.
She says, unburdened by what has been and looking forward to the brighter future.
Yes, there's
something more to it.
Yeah. Looking to what can be, unburdened by what has been.
You got it.
Destroying the past. And her dad was a communist. He was a communist professor at Stanford.
It wasn't your professor, was it?
No.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
But there's a few at Stanford.
Yeah. Now they're everywhere in the higher education. But so when I saw January 6th, I realized it was a repeat of the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping, where there were 12 people arrested for an attempted kidnapping of Gretchen Whitmer, and supposedly to kidnap her and kill her. And 8 of them were FBI officers. And what they were doing was basically getting people online and working them for months and months and months, and then entrapping them. Now, I believe all the court trials, there were jury trials through the 4 that were convicted, because the FBI is not held responsible and not held accountable. I believe they were all thrown out. But with January 6th, this is where venue is so important in the United States justice system, because in DC and in Manhattan, you have a Marxist system where it doesn't matter what's true. It's what is up, and it's the goal. The goal is to silence and possibly even kill your political enemy.
Well, you don't mind if I touch base with Judge Chutkin on that, do you? As to the
No, I don't mind.
accuracy of what you're saying.
I don't mind. I don't know. I don't know if she identifies as. A lot of them do identify as Marxist.
Well, and then you're watching the January 6th. You have estimated that was a Christopher Wray, Nancy Pelosi, and Merrick Garland production.
Yeah, it was a production. And Martin Armstrong, who you may know, he's a prognosticator. He believes that that Nancy Pelosi's goal was simply to have a state of emergency, so there would be no discussion about any of the election, and just certify it, just get it done. And that's exactly what happened. But so the FBI, they're having to do FOIA requests. How many people were in the crowd? They don't even know there were so many. And we know Ray Epps was leading. There were 5 breaches of the barriers. He was at 4 of them.
But slapped on the wrist.
Yeah. And
he
could attend his hearing over Zoom, which nobody else could. And it was only after 3 years.
To date, Christopher Wray is not able to give you the number of FBI agents and
Right.
what do they call them?
Provocateurs and
Yeah, how
agitators.
many are working with the FBI within that crowd?
Yeah, I know. I know. Well, Clay Higgins did an investigation and he figured that within the Capitol, there were Trump-clad FBI officers waiting. It is believed that the FBI are the ones, like in earlier 2020 protests, there had been rocks and stuff placed strategically so that they could break windows. It was probably FBI agitators that were doing that, and getting it. But the police opened the doors for a lot of them, and people were wandering around taking pictures and selfies and that kind of thing. So it was, quote unquote, mostly peaceful, but the FBI was in the Capitol waiting so that they could lead protesters to the right offices. You know why? Because it's built like a maze. You would never find Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence's office unless someone took you. So they were Trump clad and I know where it is, and people just followed him. And unfortunately, that cost them 4 to 8 years of their life. We'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic that Trump will win and that he will pardon all of them. And I hope they get restitution because they have been so abused. Anyway, so I thought, what do I
Well,
do?
20-year sentences for Proud Boys that weren't even there.
Right.
But that's twofold, is to shut them up, but to send chill waves to people
throughout
like
ripples through anybody thinking about, for example, in the 2024 election, we know they're going to cheat. That's in their DNA. Yeah, lie, cheat, steal. It's because they're doing wonderful things. So they're going to cheat. So if anyone stands up to that, they'll get the Enrico Tarrio treatment. And that's part of their thinking is we'll take care of you guys.
And you are not allowed, apparently, according to them, to even deny the legitimacy of whatever the election results are.
Right. You got more time in these quote unquote trials. If you said, no, I still think Trump won, they'll double your sentence.
And yet we have political prisoners taken into custody to send the same message. Shut up or we'll put you there.
Right. That's why I called it America.
That started your group.
Yeah, because I was praying and I thought, wow, in the Vietnam War, one thing that people did to stand up against the war was just wear these bracelets. And it was a peaceful way of saying, I don't agree, and I'm standing up for this individual. And so I did that, and I wrote, I hired writers and have stories of every single POW in prison, because there's 1,500 that have been indicted, but currently there's about 240 in prison. And so I've started businesses before, and the reason I did it as a business and not as a nonprofit was simply who the jurisdiction was under, right? Having learned jurisdiction is really important. So if you do a nonprofit, your jurisdiction is under the IRS. Yeah, and
can be revoked at their will.
Yeah, and it can be slow walked, as many were in 2012 under one of Obama's IRS chiefs. And so I just thought, this is a Tennessee entity. It's, I got it right away, and I'm not going to deal with any of the nonsense. I was really careful to try to make sure I wasn't going to run into the problems that people run into when they're trying to do something patriotic.
I understand. And the proceeds in part are used to help these people?
Well, yeah, but it's right now it's, it's an act of it is an act of ministry. It's a charity because I'm losing money on it, which I don't mind at all. It wasn't I wasn't thinking I was just trying to do something to help people get involved. And what I found, though, is that people are scared. People don't really want to get involved. And even when because this, I have been in the entertainment industry. These stories are very powerful, and people want to write them. They many people won't write them because they're scared that the Bureau of Prisons will have their name. And I just thought, wow, it's working on Americans. And here's my message. I thought, you don't understand. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, he had been imprisoned by the Soviet Union under the Stalinist tactics of silencing your enemies. But he was a wonderful writer, and he wrote, I'm sure you know, Archipelago Gulag, about that experience. But he said, if we'd only known that we could stand up, and that when a operative, i.e. in our case, an FBI officer, came to flash bang us at 5 a.m. in the morning, that every once in a while, one of them may not come home. If we'd only known, then it all would have fallen apart. And so my thought is, no, the time to be strong is now. It's not when we're locked down. This is not, we still have the internet, we still have X, that is one of the reasons why the counter movement is working, is because one of the things for communism to succeed in taking over a country from the inside, they have to have control of information.
Well,
they've done
as
a pretty
Harvey
good job
Milk,
with the mainstream media, but we have the internet, we have X now, and I mean, you get all this information. What's really going on?
It's interesting. I watched Tucker's interview with Harmeet Dillon, and in there she said, if Kamala wins, we won't have conversations like you and I are having anymore.
Right.
And we will not have X anymore.
Right.
And when that reaches that point, then you isolate everybody from each other.
Right.
And it debilitates you. And then if you identify yourself as an opponent, what happened? Everybody looks at Stalin as the great killer. And in the March of Flowers, I believe it was, Mao encouraged people that would challenge or offer corrections for his programs to come forward with those, because he wanted to hear them. And everyone that came forward was killed.
Yep.
Or imprisoned. And nobody killed more people in a short period of time than Vladimir Lenin. When he took power, he eliminated 7 million people in the first few years that were opposed to his movement. By the time he was
done, it was 55 million, I think.
Well, that was over 40 years.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad score if you're a dictator like him. But 7 million, and then God took Vladimir off the stage, Lenin. I would hate that to be the last thing I did before I left Earth. But these people all do it. And if you become an enemy of the state, then you're afraid to talk to your neighbor.
Right.
You're afraid to talk to your friends. You don't know who your friends are.
Right.
And then they've got you.
They started that under COVID. Like, for example, in Tim Waltz's Minnesota, he had neighbors reporting on neighbors. And I was working at a liberal nonprofit as a director, and just on Nextdoor, someone said, hey, because I was living in LA at the time, I'm really afraid of putting a Trump sign on my lawn. And I said, you got to do it. Just do it, And for that, someone took my name, looked up where I worked, called the main reception and said, Katherine Makinney's a racist and you have to fire her. And
really?
I got to my boss, who was a VP, and she said, are you kidding me? Because I'd worked there at that time a couple of years. She knew I was conservative. They were all liberal, but she was like, Catherine's not a racist. She's not. She's like, what did you do exactly? And then the woman started backpedaling, and all I did was say, go ahead, put a Trump sign on your lawn. So it didn't go anywhere because I didn't have an insane, even though they were liberal, they were not insane. But that's what they do. They try to fire you. They were at that point just trying to fire you. But if it goes further, they will try to eliminate you, or you'll have the FBI at your door. They'll put you in prison. without a trial, like they've done to poor Jake Lang, J6er. But so I did this, and I felt like people need to get involved. They need to do something. And I felt like most Americans, most patriots want to do something. They just don't know what to do. So this seemed like a very, very, very mild thing, very non-committal. It's $15, to do. But the sales have not, I mean, I've gone on 15 podcasts. The sales have not been that great. People are scared.
Well,
and it makes me sad because I can't
go ahead.
I can't advertise on Facebook or Google or YouTube or I can't advertise on the standard places that you advertise for products, retail products. So
well, your website is below your name on the screen, or if not now, soon will be. And people who are interested in participating in this program of buying a wristband with the name of a prisoner.
Yeah.
They're J6.
Yeah.
You go to that website.
And then you get a story, and it tells you how you can write them, if they have a give, send, go, when their birthday is. And so that way it's overwhelming to try to care for 220 people, 240 now. But you can care for one person. You can just write them. And I guess, is there risk? Right now, I don't think so. I think that what they're doing in a lot of cases is they're holding back the mail and not giving it to them. Or giving it to them like once every 6 months or something like that. They really are torturing these people. I could go into the stories. They are, I mean, sometimes I would just stop because I'd weep, what is being done to these people. Poor Jake has been in here since, I believe he was arrested in January of 2021. And so he's been in prison for all that time. He's not gotten a trial. And for 3/4 of the time, he's been in solitary.
And at the bottom of the AmericanLandscape.substack.com, we have committed to having the video of them singing from prison until they are released.
Yes.
And, due process requires 48 hours turnaround for your arraignment. And these people are now going on 4 years.
Yes. Yeah.
And
they've broken so many. But you know why? You know why legally they're able to break a lot of our basically constitutional rights? It's because of the Patriot Act.
I was a great opponent at the time.
Were you? Yeah,
absolutely.
Because it took away. All they have to do is call you a terrorist, and there's no definition for it.
It's also, the same debate back then around after 9/11, whether America could torture prisoners. Adamantly opposed to it because it's what separates us as a country from the rest of the world. And just because we can torture somebody and put them in a foreign prison and do it, it was just a disgrace.
They're doing it to these folks. Let me
tail off and just interrupt you just a second. Are you familiar with Tina Peters?
Yeah.
Are you going to add her to your wristband list?
Yeah, I can. Here's the thing about, because I didn't call it the J6 project or anything to do with J6. Why? Because I know it won't stop at J6. J6 is just a canary in the coal mine.
No, look at Steve Bannon.
Yeah, Steve Bannon, poor Peter Navarro. They would have done the same with Roger Stone if Trump had not pardoned him. The
bankruptcy of Giuliani and Gateway Pundit.
Mark Houck. I mean, people that were praying in front of abortion clinics are going to prison.
Well, Tina Peters is special in my heart. She's a 68-year-old grandmother.
I know.
Gold star. For those that may not know, was just sentenced to 9 years for keeping the records of Dominion records.
To show the fraud in the 2020 election.
Yeah, basically destroy the evidence of fraud or we'll send you to prison. Right. And she has stood fast. Not only that, the day after she was sentenced to prison, she did a kill switch and released all the data
I
that
did
she
not know
had
that.
stored.
I did not know
Now
that.
that's a gutsy woman, and
That's
she
smart.
needs to be freed.
Right, right.
She
She
needs to be
does.
freed. Anyway, Katherine, on this episode, we've come to the end. I thank you for being with us. Would you join us again? Because there was something else that you had mentioned that I thought would be of interest, and that is there is hope.
Yes.
You do see a glimmer of hope in the future. I'd like to discuss that on the back end, as
Okay.
well as what do you see in terms of civil unrest coming our way in the next few months. So thank you for joining Just Saying,
Thank you.
and we will see you next time, probably within a day or so, I would expect. And we'll talk soon. And thank you for joining us at the Just Saying. Keep posted and subscribe to theamericanlandscape.substack.com and go look at Katherine's website, which is below her name there. Okay, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.